Alrighty, hello there everybody. Hello. I think that I'm live. I hope that I'm live. I feel like I'm live. Let's see if I'm live. Let me just, yeah, I think I am. I'm good. Okay. All right. Hello. My name is Lisa Callahan. I'm the founder here of the Women's Emotional Eating Community Support Group. And you guys have not seen me live in a little while. I actually took about a month off of the live trainings because I have been reworking the Crush That Food Thing Self-Discovery System, which is a program that I have where I help women identify their invisible emotional relationship with food through taking a journey of self-discovery. So because I've been working on that, I haven't been here live, but I have a lot of videos that I posted. So I hope you guys have been watching me, and I hope that you've been enjoying a lot of the live trainings that I've been putting out there. So today I'm going to be talking about how to eat out without overeating. And I am now like a pro at eating out. I usually eat at home, but I just came back from a 10-day vacation, which I have not vacationed in 2 years, much like everybody else. But even when I'm home, like I don't eat out that much. I actually do cook at home a lot. And so being away for 10 days and eating out every single solitary meal was incredible, because years ago, every single meal would have been like torture for me. Every single meal would have been like this twisted mind thing, feeling like I was cheating on my diet, feeling like I was doing the wrong thing, I was being bad. Then I would have flipped the coin. I would have been like, oh, well, I have to get it all in now. And I would have been like gorging myself with food, like little by little over the days of the vacation. Like the first couple of days, I would have been really good. I would have been trying to eat the salads. I would have been no to the bread. I would have been no to the wine, all that stuff. But as the vacation went on and on, right, it's 10 days, like I know how I would have responded, let's say 6 years ago. And the response that I would have had to myself would have been so damaging that it would have taken me like at least a month, if not 2, if not 3, to have gotten myself back on track when I got home. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this today is because being able to see this flip side of the coin, to really put the amount of work and effort that I've put into learning about myself in these last 6 years to the real quote unquote test of, the experience of life, like just really living, was amazing. Now, I do not weigh myself very often, but I can. I mean, I used to not be able to weigh myself at all. Years ago, I would weigh myself probably 3 times a day. Sometimes it became an obsession. And then while I was healing from my emotional eating habit, I had to stop weighing myself. So I stopped weighing myself for probably about 3 years. And even if I went to the doctors, I would say to them, I'm like recovering from some food thing and I can't weigh myself. So I didn't trust that I could look at the weight on the scale and feel okay with no matter what the number was. So now I actually can weigh myself, and I do it very occasionally. However, before I left for vacation, I did weigh myself. And when I got home 10 days later, I did weigh myself this morning, and I'm exactly the same weight. So it's an interesting thing, because considering the fact that I did eat out every single day, and I did eat a lot of different foods that I'm not accustomed to. I don't really eat bread that much. I don't drink wine at all. Not that I wouldn't, I just typically don't. And I was in Greece, so there was bread and wine and olives and cheese and like all kinds of stuff every single day, every single meal. When you think about it, and you think about how like we think like that food, if you're eating, a lot of foods and whatever, that you're gonna gain weight. Like this was a perfect like example of how it's not about the food. And that's why it's so important for me to bring this topic to you guys today, because knowing what I know now and knowing what I knew before, like I am on both sides of this. I have 1000% been in that fear mindset, that fear zone, that thing where before I would go out to dinner, maybe I would sacrifice lunch. I would save my calories. Or a vacation, I would like diet for 3 weeks before I went to make sure that I lost weight, because then I was knowing I was going to put it on again. And so when you're living in the fear zone, like constantly, when you're always behind the scenes, like thinking about the fearful stuff in the back of your mind, you don't get to enjoy the current life that's going on. So in my trip, and I ate out every single meal, remember this, like I wasn't in a place where I could like buy groceries and cook my own food. I wasn't. I literally ate out every single solitary meal for 10 days, period. And being in that place where I did that and being able to have each meal be its own, like there was never a moment where I was like, oh God, we have to eat dinner, you know? Like, oh, how am I going to do this? I just ate this big fat lunch and now I've got to eat dinner. Like I never thought about it. And so this is going to be 6 things to think about as far as how to be able to eat out without overeating. And so the first thing that I want to tell you about is that it's not about the food. And I know that that's an interesting piece because like we think, Lisa, like I'm here and I'm here because I overeat. So it's absolutely about the food. And yet I beg to differ. It's about an experience that you're having. And so when you're going out to eat, and even if you're alone, mind you, like this is not just with family and friends and such, but even if you're alone, the experience of eating is actually a very personal experience. And yet because it's a social thing, when we're going out, people are like, you know, even if you don't take a piece of bread, sometimes someone will say to you like, oh, what, are you on a diet? You're not taking any bread? Or if you take the bread and then you're eating and then as you're eating it, you're like, oh, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm breaking my diet, you know? And all of these like fearful thoughts that come into it, if we can just remove the actual food itself, like as if, think about like if none of that actual food mattered, like if you were just sitting there eating air, the words that can translate into the negative thoughts about yourself, and you're using food to do that, that's really what it's about. And so if you're going to take this beautiful experience of nourishing your body and eating, like anything, whether it be a grape or whether it be a piece of bread, it doesn't matter, or a piece of chicken, whatever, it doesn't matter. If you're going to take that and then use it to like stab yourself in the back, pretty much, to judge yourself, to feel like, you know, you're now a bad person, like you're a bad human being because you took a piece of bread, and then to spew that out of your mouth, which a lot of times we do because we judge ourselves, and we tell ourselves like, oh, this is so horrible of me, like why am I eating this? What's wrong with me? Why can't I control myself? If we're going to use that food to do that to ourselves, we have to be able to separate it and to recognize that if you're going to do that to yourself to begin with, it's not about the food. You're using the food to hurt yourself. And so this is the interesting part, is that like we get very caught up in the actual like eating out thing, going into a restaurant, ordering off a menu, what's good, what's bad, what's healthy for us, what's not healthy for us, what has too many calories, what has too much sugar, you know. We get caught up in all of the labels and all of the things. And I want to tell you, I ate every single meal. I was in Greece. There was bread. There was wine, there was cheese, there was olives, there was, what else was there? There was pastries, there was croissants, there was lots of stuff. There really was. And yet at the same time, like there was never a thought, and this is different for me. You have to remember that I've been on both sides of this. So when I'm saying to you that like 6 years ago, had I been on that same trip, oh my gosh, every minute would have been thought about the food. But the thing is it's just that I would have been using the food to attack myself mentally, emotionally, and that would have hurt me physically, because on this trip, like I didn't have any stomach issues. Like I never had a time where like my stomach hurt or anything like that. Had this been 6 years ago and I would have been all caught up in my mentals, the stomach would have killed me. Probably would have had constipation, diarrhea, gas, bloating, whatever, acid reflux, like because I did eat different things. I don't really eat cheese that much. I don't eat bread that much. I don't drink wine that much. And I did do that on this trip. And if you notice, like I said, I didn't gain a pound. So it's like, how is that possible? So some of this, all of this really is about your mindset of yourself. It's not about the mindfulness of the eating part, which I know can be part of it, But when we're eating out, I want you to think of a couple of things. I want you to think of, how are you using this food in a way to help you or to hurt you? Or are you using it to hurt you? And if at any time your choices of what you're doing, of what you're eating, are meant to hurt you, like if you're going to look at this bread, you're going to take a bite and you're going to be like, oh, what did I do that for? And then you're going to start to judge yourself and shame yourself and blame yourself and guilt yourself, and you're going to be full of regrets. And why did I do that? What's wrong with me? Whatever. Then honestly, this has to be a thought in your head that now it's not about the food. It's about how you feel about yourself to begin with. And that's why it's interesting, because now, 6 years later, I feel good about myself. And mind you, remember this, and I've told you guys this before on some of my other trainings, is that I was underweight before. Remember this, because I was not, I used to purge with exercise. So I would binge, and then I would over-exercise. I exercised sometimes 20 hours a week. So I was constantly keeping myself in a certain weight that felt like it was the right thing for me. And so that was a sickness of itself. That was something that I was constantly letting myself out of jail free for a few hours, where I would just like eat everything, and then I was like right back in the prison cell where I was just sitting on the bicycle pedaling for 20 hours. And so it's interesting because now in my life, I'm happier than I've ever been, accepting of myself. I like myself. I do. And so going into that with a different mindset changed everything. Now remember, I was underweight before. So I'm about 15 to 20 pounds heavier than I've ever been in my life. And that's an interesting piece, because even if you're starting at a high weight and you're using food to hurt yourself, I was using food and then punishment of eating that food to hurt myself. So it's all the same thing. It really is. What I've done now is I've worked on liking myself first, and then I don't get to use other things to hurt myself. So it's not about the food. It's about your feelings about yourself to begin with. And this is something that's a concept that I teach in my Crush That Food Thing self-discovery system, and it's called primary foods versus secondary foods. And so when you're thinking about your primary foods, it's important to take into the consideration that as a human being, as your whole life exists, right? It's not about the food. It's about you as a person. So if your self-worth is, if you're starving for self-worth, if you're starving for self-esteem, if you're starving for self-confidence, if you're starving for self-love, if you're starving for boundaries, if you're starving for self-acceptance, if you're starving for those things, if you're starving for joy, if you're starving for belonging, if you're starving for, feeling like good from the inside out, if that's where you're starving, well then yeah, you're gonna use the food to hurt yourself. And so it's interesting because when we go out to eat sometimes, we end up using that as a pass to be like, well, this was on the menu, I couldn't help it, I had to eat this, I had to eat that. And yet at the same time, when I ate out every single meal for 10 days, because I never used the food to hurt myself, I never really overate. Now, I'm not saying I didn't eat a lot. I did. I did eat a lot, trust me. But I never really overate to the point where then I was angry at myself. I never, because my intuition kicked in. My intuition was like, okay, Lisa, stop. This is not, like, you're done. And trust me, I ate a lot of stuff. I was staying at an all-inclusive resort, so there was a lot of food. And yet when I took the food, like, my first thought is that I care about myself, and so I want to nourish my body. So when I took my first plate of food for my all-inclusive resort, every piece of it was like something that would nourish me. Like I had like 4 different types of salads that I put on one plate, and then I made sure that there was some, really like a fish or something, like I definitely made certain because I like myself, not because I was trying to diet. There was such a difference such a difference when your primary foods, like everything that I just said, the self-love, the self-worth, the self-acceptance, the love and belonging of yourself, the joy, like when that is already filled up, you don't need to have the actual food to make you feel good or bad about yourself. And so what I chose, because I feel like I am filled with primary foods, I don't feel empty where I have to then use the secondary foods to make me feel good or bad. So I hope that makes sense when I say that. Primary foods, remember, are self-worth, self-acceptance, self-esteem, love and belonging, joy, happiness, like internally feeling good from the inside out. And so if you start from a place where you do feel good about yourself from the inside out, trust me when I say, I don't care where you are not going to overeat, which means that you can basically eat whatever you want. And I just proved that because like I said, I went on a 10-day trip where I ate out every meal. I had baklava, I had halava, I had ice cream, I had cookies, I had these breadstick things that were amazing. I ate a lot of fruit, the like sugary fruit, like watermelon and grapes and things like that. I had wine. I had bread literally every night, probably with every meal. Like, and how is it possible that I did that and didn't gain a pound? And I'm no different than anybody else. And yet it's because there was no feeling with the food. Like, I just went and like, this is what we're doing now. It's like 7 o'clock, we're eating dinner. It was not the food that was drawing me in to gain or subtract a feeling about myself. Like, the feeling about myself is already in existence. The food is just secondary. The food was just something to do while we were enjoying our time in this great place. And I want you to think about that when you go to a restaurant. If the food is the first focus on your thoughts, then what you really are going to want to do is you're really going to want to take a step back and look at your primary foods in your life. Like, where is my joy coming from? Is my joy coming from putting this food into my mouth and then turning it around and feeling horrible about myself with that food? Like, you can't have both. You can't have that food be the only sense of joy for your life and then use the same exact thing to take that and turn that into something negative where now you look in the mirror or you're trying to button your jeans, and then go like, oh, why did I eat that? What's wrong with me? I'm so horrible, blah, blah, blah. You can't do it. You cannot have both. So we have to be able to separate the food and the experience that you're taking with that food. So when you're going out, is it like, oh, I can't wait to get that Parmesan, Or is it, I'm enjoying my company? Like, am I gonna enjoy the experience of being around other people and eating out? Or even, even if you're eating alone, like just to be able to enjoy like sitting and eating your food without using that food to hurt yourself. Like, which one are you doing? So it's important to be able to remember that I want you to make certain that you're always thinking about love-based thoughts, because I used to have a ton of fear-based thoughts. So let's say I was going out to eat and I knew I was going out to eat. I would make certain beforehand that like I would skip a meal. I would skip, breakfast and lunch so that I could have dinner, because in my mind, I was like, oh, I can't have the calories. I can't do this. I can't do that. So there's all this fear that was encompassed in this experience. And I really want you to remember that the eating out, the experience that you're getting, the pleasure, and food is pleasurable. The actual art of eating, the actual feeling of drinking something and tasting it. Like, this is what it's about. If you're using that to hurt yourself, then you're using food for the wrong reasons. And so I want to make sure that when you do experience this eating out experience, that you are not preliminarily setting yourself up for self-sabotage. that you're not preliminarily putting a fear-based thought into your mind with a love-based action. So we talk in Crush That Food Thing about love versus fear. And what are your thoughts about? Are your thoughts meant to help you grow, or are they meant to keep you stuck? Now, if your fearful thoughts come into your head and you're like, oh my gosh, I know I'm going to eat later, I can't eat now, and blah, blah, blah. Like, you have to be able to think to yourself, is that a fear-based thought, or is it a love-based thought? It's fear-based, because it's making you feel less than. It's making you feel like it's literally setting yourself up to tell yourself, you are not to be trusted, so we can't trust you at that eating out buffet, whatever. So because we can't trust you there, we'll have to sacrifice over here. And so before we leave, we can't eat this, we can't eat that, we got to make sure we diet, whatever, I'm saving my calories, blah, blah, blah. That's all fear. And then when you get to the other side and now you're going wild, like, you literally have just told yourself that you cannot be trusted. Now, how are you supposed to build a good relationship with yourself when you can't trust yourself? Right? It doesn't make sense. So it's like you're preliminarily giving yourself a subliminal message to tell yourself, I cannot trust myself. So when you're counting calories and you're putting yourself into this small, limited little box and you're thinking about things in a very, very narrow way, you have to remember that you're a person. And so all of these like methods out there that tell you about calorie counting and you know, writing down every meal that you eat, the Fitness Pal, all of that garbage, honestly, it's garbage. And I used to not think so trust me when I say this. If you're listening to me and you're like ready to shut me off right now, I get it. I don't blame you. If I was listening to myself 6 years ago, I would have shut myself off too. I would have been like, this girl doesn't know what she's talking about. If I don't document everything that I eat, if I don't write everything down, I won't know what to do. I'll overeat, and then I won't know I'm overeating or whatever. Do you see all the fear? Do you see the energy that's put into that? That's not love. That's not love. That's self-hate. That's convincing yourself that you are never going to feel any different than you do right now. And so you got to keep that. And so you can keep that, you're going to go ahead and now count every calorie, make sure that you're watching everything, you know, whatever, so that when you overeat, when you're out, you can like let yourself off the hook because you're like, well, you know, I was dieting for 3 days, so now I could eat this dinner, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. I want you to enjoy your life. I really enjoyed this trip. I ate out every meal for 10 days, 3 meals a day. All kinds of stuff that I typically don't eat. And like I said, I didn't gain a pound, not one pound. So we have to be able to see this from a wider lens. Now, I know that labeling this, you know, thing here, when I said how to eat out without overeating, whatever, I'm certain that you might not have expected to hear what I'm telling you, because I know that 6 years ago, and I'm going to read to you something, 6 years ago, this would have been my recommendation. I was a personal trainer, remember that? And when I would tell my clients, like, I had them very, very specifically banking on the fact that if they went out to eat, they couldn't trust themselves. So this is what you had to do beforehand. And I swear, this is my list, right? Make sure that you read the menu before you go, so that way you don't get there and now you're like salivating looking at the the shrimp scampi, and then you can't control yourself. So I was like, make sure you have exactly what you're going to order prepared, so that you know, so that you can keep yourself in that little prison, right? Like I didn't ever think that I could trust myself, so I knew that I had to preliminarily make decisions before I went to the restaurant, so that way I could like keep myself kind of locked up, you know, chained to this version of myself that was really unfair, because it was like me telling myself, you cannot be trusted, you can never be trusted, and this is what you have to do to make certain that you know that you can never be trusted. So it was literally like sending myself subliminal messages. Let's see, I used to tell my clients also to make sure that they ate a meal, a healthy meal, before they left for the restaurant, so that they would not be tempted. And honestly, this is ridiculous. It really is. Unless like you're completely going, like if you're going to a backyard barbecue and there's like only hot dogs there, like then I would say, okay, I'm gonna eat before I leave, because I don't want to put that, I don't want to eat a hot dog. But if you're just gonna be going out for enjoyment and really like experiencing the love and the beauty of being out with friends or doing whatever with family, you know, just trust yourself. Like, know that you've got this, that you can go into a restaurant and you can choose something on the menu that will make you feel good about yourself from the inside out. That's not going to have you leaving feeling like, ugh, why did I do that? What's wrong with me? Because then you're using food to hurt yourself. And that's sad. You don't need to do that. The other thing was, like to make sure that you like drink your water before you eat the first bite of your meal and whatever. You know, it's again, it's setting yourself up for fear, right? It's like, okay, now it's like thinking out of the box and saying to yourself, like, I cannot be trusted. I'm going to overeat right now. So now I'm going to put this rule into my place and I'm going to drink this water before I eat my first bite, so that way I'm not going to overeat. I would rather you start to decide for yourself why you can't trust yourself to begin with, and then start to work backwards from there, and to be able to see yourself through a wider lens and not practice staying stuck. Because all of that is a practice for continuing your position where you cannot trust yourself when you're going out to eat. Let's see, what else did I used to say to people? I used to say to order and then like put like half of it in a to-go box, like before you even do it. Again, it's sending yourself a message that you cannot be trusted. And so it doesn't really make sense to do that to yourself, because I'd rather, again, you start to build up some confidence. And remember, the primary foods is confidence, self-acceptance, self-esteem, joy, love, and belonging, right? We're taking away, if we go into this with a fear-based thought and we're like, oh, half my meal needs to go in a box, I can't trust myself, no way. It's like these constant reminders of how like terrible you are. That's not okay. So I want you to try and remember that you're having an experience. When you're going out to eat, this is an experience. It's something to enjoy the surroundings, your company, the atmosphere, the restaurant, whatever it is. It's an experience. So put that into your mindset first. And think about it like that you can trust your intuition. You're a very intelligent human being. You are. I don't care what book smarts or not, but whatever. It doesn't matter. You have intuition. It's the very thing that like has you kind of being like, did I leave the stove on? Like everybody has that. And so as you're going into this restaurant scenario, start to tell yourself that. Say, I'm going to let my intuition be my guide. And you'll be able to feel that tight feeling inside of you if you're looking at the menu and you're starting to order something that is going to go against your integrity. Meaning you're like, I really want to feel good inside, but I'm going to order this cheeseburger and fries because I really like it, and I only go to this restaurant every month or whatever, and I know I'm not going to get this and whatever, but then you're going to use that to feed this negative voice inside of you that later on is going to be like, oh, why did I do that? What's wrong with me? Like your intuition, you'll meet a crossroad. You will. You'll meet a crossroad where you're going to look at it and you're going to be like, that's not going to be okay. And then you're going to be like, yes, I'll have that, please. That right there is where you can actually change the trajectory of meeting your future self. So we have to be able to think about this. We have to be able to say to you, like I did this on vacation the whole time. I mean, I would have a piece of this or a piece of that or dessert or wine or whatever. And it was okay if I took a bite and then put it down and was like, all right, I'm good with that. Like, be okay with leaving stuff over. You do not have to finish everything on your plate. You don't. You're a human being. So your body is different than another person's body. you're the one that's going to go home with the suffering. You're the one that's going to go home with the indigestion. You're the one that's going to go home with the constipation or diarrhea or something that's going to feel awful. So you don't have to worry about like what everybody else is eating. This is your body. This is your house. You're taking this baby home. You're the one that's going to be sitting with yourself saying, oh, why did I eat that? Or you're the one that's going to go home and not even think about it anymore, but it's going to be an afterthought because it's not going to matter. And that's the whole purpose of this training, is really to let you know that eating out is no different than eating in, or it doesn't matter. It's not about the food. It's about your feelings that you have inside of yourself. And so making certain that your primary foods, right, your joy, your self-acceptance, your self-love, your self-belonging, your self-worth, making sure that those are filled and fed first. And then be able to say to yourself, if you're going to be using this food to hurt yourself, well, that's backwards. That doesn't work. And so if you're using secondary food, which is the food that you put in your mouth, to hurt yourself, then we have a problem on our hands. And there is a solution for it. And I promise you there's a solution because I've solved it. And I have been on both sides. And that's why I can speak so clearly and understand what you're going through, because I've been on that side. And I am no different than you. No different. I'm just a girl. That's it. Just a girl who struggled for 30 years with an emotional eating issue, with low self-esteem, low self-worth, low joy, like low love and belonging for myself. And because of that, I used food to keep me very fearful and very stuck. And I used food to convince myself over and over and over and over and over again how horrible I was. So I was using food to hurt myself. Are you? Question mark. So get your intuition in your thoughts. And make certain that you speak up. Meaning that you don't have to eat what's available in a restaurant. You don't have to. You absolutely can change some things. You absolutely can. If I go to a restaurant and I'm like, there is a zero on the menu that I am willing to feed myself with, like to nourish myself. Because there's three things that are very important to me. Number one is something homemade, which is nice. Is something freshly made, that's also nice to me. And is something lovingly made. So, meaning that somebody asked me, hey, do you want to go to Ben & Jerry's, which is not homemade or freshly made? And I'm like, yeah, I do, actually, because I want to spend time with you. Like, it's lovingly, right? There's like a feeling, there's an energy. Food is an exchange of energy with yourself. It just is. So it is, calorically speaking, like if you're going to go with the scientific route, yeah, it's giving your body energy to move around and to stay alive. So, but think about the emotional energy and the spiritual energy that you're gaining from that experience of eating out, from what you're doing. What are you gifting yourself something, or are you punishing yourself for something? So if the feelings that you have about yourself are already in the negative and your primary foods are already low, yeah, you're going to use secondary food to keep hurting yourself. And that's not okay. And that's why what I take my clients through is a journey of self-discovery. And so with being able to discover the things about myself where I was using food to hurt myself, and why I felt like that way about myself to begin with, once I started to unravel that, food became unimportant. And that's why I want to encourage you to look inside, look at your primary foods. How do you feel about yourself as a human being? Period. And then you'll be able to understand, well, am I using secondary foods to hurt myself? Am I using secondary foods to hurt myself? You won't be able to do it backwards. You won't be able to look into your secondary foods and count your calories and restrict yourself and go on a diet and blah, blah, blah. You won't be able to do that. You won't be able to work on your secondary foods without putting energy into working on yourself to see where your lack of joy is, to see where your lack of self-acceptance is, your lack of self-love. Like, you won't be able to do the other one first, right? Because the secondary foods, the actual foods you're putting in your mouth, are secondary. You have to figure out where you're lacking in primary foods first. And the last thing is, eat dessert. Please, just eat dessert. enjoy your life, enjoy the food, enjoy where you're at, enjoy your experience. Get a dessert, get forced food and share with people, cut it into pieces. Enjoy the experience. I went out to dinner with my sons, both of my sons, and we got dessert. We were at like a sushi restaurant and they got fried cheesecake. And I cannot tell you the experience that was so different than in the past, where I felt so good. Because for the, like, really the, like, one of the first times to just experience, like, the thought in my head of how that would have looked 6 years ago, I would have felt terrible. They would have ordered dessert. I would have been like, nope, not having any. You boys get dessert. Not for me. And then I would have sat there, and then, like, as I was, like, salivating, watching them eat, then I would have been like, oh, all right, I'll just take one bite. No, one bite. And then I would have taken a bite, probably would have taken two, and then I would have been like, oh, take the spoon away from me. Put it over there. I can't trust myself, you know? And so I would have used it to have such a negative experience. And even just the feeling of it, you know, the whole, like, oh, you're thin, you could eat that, and you young people, you have a great metabolism, or I don't know, all the negative energy that would have gone into the air, the worry, the fear. Like, as soon as they would have ordered dessert, my mind would have been like, and all of the fear would have just come in, and I wouldn't have enjoyed it. It was so nice being able to just, I don't know, I didn't think about it, I didn't say anything, took a few bites, put my spoon down, like nothing. All of the things that you think that you could never not think, it is possible not to think them, and I am proof of that. And I know that I'm me and you're you, and that's fine and all, but like I said, I'm no different than you. I'm just a girl. You're a woman, I'm a woman, period. And if you want to look inside of yourself and see why you're using food to hurt yourself, then you'll be able to experience this too, and you will be able to see both sides of the coin. You'll be like, oh my gosh, this is what I used to do, and this is what I can do now. And that's an amazing piece. So I hope that you'd like to experience it someday. You can always reach out and get some answers to your questions if you want to private message me. I'm always available, and I can always give you a complimentary phone call where we can chat a little bit and see what it is that you would like to do with your food experiences and with your life experiences, and see where it is that you might be keeping yourself stuck. One thing that I know is that you do not want to be the only thing standing in your own way. And I know that for 30 years, I was standing in my way and I didn't know it. Now that I know better, I can do better. And now that I can do better, I enjoy my life much more. So, all right. I hope that you enjoyed this training, and I hope you can start to work on yourself from the inside out so that you can go out and enjoy your restaurant experience. All right. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching. Bye now.